In conversation with Elizabeth Pridgen. Elizabeth Pridgen is a writer from Nash County, North Carolina. She has been writing for almost 10 years. At only 18 years old, Pridgen wrote her first novel, The Life of David L. Penny and Never After, both of which were published by Outlaw Publishing LLC. Later, at 21-year-old, Pridgen wrote and published a third novel, Zero Gravity, an Amazon bestseller for dystopian science fiction in the US, UK, and Australia. He's also the author of the poetry collection, Records You Don't Care About, which also became an Amazon bestseller. Pridgen has also been featured in literary magazines such as the award-winning magazine from UNC, Wilmington, Atlantis. A short story, The Grave, featured in Atlantis, was also an honorable mention for nonfiction for the North Carolina College Media Association. Pridgen graduated from Nash Community College with an associate in art degree in 2020 with honors. She graduated with a BA in creative writing from North Carolina State University in 2022 with English honors. And in today's episode of Photo Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today, Elizabeth Pridgen. How are you doing today, Elizabeth? Welcome on the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited, really, that we are here today to sit down and have a conversation around your lovely Zero Graffiti. Quite beautiful you're here. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, I want us to start this conversation actually with your poetry collection. I know you've written, in different genres of literature, but then I wanted us to start with your poetry collection in the name of Record You Don't Care About, a poetry collection of heartbreak and change. I wanted to ask you what inspired the making of this poem? How did it come together writing it, and how did it come with a title? Beautiful one, really. And do you have a personal connection to the message within it?
Yeah, of course. So I came up with the idea for Records You Don't Care About. It was at a time where I was going through a really mentally and emotionally difficult time.
Mm,
And some things happened in my life. And there are some moments in life where you think you'll have everything figured out and you think you're going to have this one set thing and you do everything you can to get that one thing and then it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. Um So that's where the idea came from. And my personal connection to it is how I went through the process of dealing with that change and how change can be difficult for people. Yeah, it's very difficult. And I came up with the title Records You Don't Care About because, from my perspective, with all the stuff that I wrote about in this poetry collection, it's stuff that means a lot to me. Things
mm,
that have happened in my life, changes that have happened in my life, and people who have helped me grow as a person. Like there's a few poems about my grandmother in there who I give a lot of credit for. Um, and it was one of the hardest but most fulfilling times I've ever had
mm,
because I made the best out of a bad time by writing about it and being as unfiltered as I could about something that happened in my life and how it got me to that point to grow and change. And I think a lot of readers really appreciate the authenticity of something that comes directly from the heart of an author because we don't really have that a lot nowadays with
mm,
social media because we see things from like one perspective. And I definitely did not want that to be the case for this poetry collection.
mm,
So I definitely poured out everything that I could for this poetry collection.
mm. I love that really. One of the things that you mentioned is the fact that it's a bit quite, it relates to some of the things you've gone through personally. And I myself, who happens to be a poet, I should have started with your first novel, Zero Graffiti, but I just feel like I would love to start with a poetry collection because I was like, yeah, it's been a while I have a poet on the show. I said, yeah, I would love to start today with poetry. One of the things I found quite beautiful about poetry is the fact that it can be quite therapeutic. You're writing something from your experience, and you're releasing all of these things on paper, and it just gives you this lovely release of emotion, talk up together. And I wanted to ask you, how does it feel like for you after writing this book, especially getting to know that it's a poetry collection of heartbreak and change? How does it feel like? Was it quite therapeutic? Was it in any way relieving? Was it in any way healing for you? How would you describe that poetry with you writing the book, if in any way? Yeah.
It was definitely healing because it's such a lot that happened in that time. And it was about I want to say 3 years ago since I started writing this
Wow.
poetry collection.
Wow.
So I took it one bit at a time because I feel like for a poetry collection, you can't necessarily rush putting so many poems in one piece because the reader will
Yeah.
definitely catch on if it's rushed.
Absolutely.
And right. So I went through it like adding one little poem at a time and
Mm.
seeing if it would fit the narrative of records you don't care about. Because I cut like at least 15 poems from this collection
Wow.
that I knew was not going to work for this collection because I definitely wanted it to fit the narrative of, okay, this is stuff that means a lot to me, but this may not mean a lot to someone else.
Mm.
So it's very therapeutic. And I actually finished the poetry collection last year and got it published. So it was 2 years worth of writing and trying to fit the narrative while also sharing something that happened in my life in an unfiltered way.
Mm.
So it was a lot of fun. This is definitely not going to be my last poetry collection that I write.
Wow. That's quite amazing to know, really. I love to hear that from you. Now let's go back to Zero Graffiti. Before I go to that, I'd like you to show the cover of Record You Don't Care About to the camera, just so we see what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Oh,
I need to talk about the cover. Can you tell us about the making of the cover?
mm-hmm.
Because I find it to be quite beautiful and quite uncommon.
Sure. So the making of the cover, I wanted it to be something that is not only its own thing, but also something that people can relate to. And a lot of things that happen nowadays is that we like to share screenshots of stuff,
Yeah.
text messages, pictures. So when we were coming up for the idea for the cover, I was talking to my cover editor at the time, and I said, I think it would be a great idea if we used a cell phone and put records you don't care about.
Mm.
And because in the poetry collection, there are a few text messages that are shown between the narrator and the person that uh, the narrator is talking to whenever there's
Yeah.
not a poem, of course.
Yeah.
So said that would be a perfect idea for this cover.
Mm.
So we came up with a few ideas and then we landed on that one. And I know a lot of people really love the cover art. They're like, oh, that's so unique. And I
Right.
wanted to also be something that, oh, this is something that I can relate to because we like to see receipts of stuff nowadays. So
Very true, Elizabeth. Very, very true. I love the description of that. That's one of the things I love about writing. I know it, different books, there's a story behind it. Yeah, just like the same way I love to think of books, literature, no matter what genre it is, as an artwork. There is also a beautiful part to it that we have sculpture as an artwork. To every sculpture, there's a story behind it. To every painting, there's a story behind it. To every creative writing, there's a story behind it. And now to even to every cover design, there's a story behind it. And I love the fact that you're able to share that. Quite beautiful, even. Now, I'd like us to go to Zero Graffiti, which description page reads quite amazingly to me on Amazon. And I would like to ask you, how does Zero Graffiti come to be? What inspired you to write that?
it's a long story how it came to be.
Mm.
So I'll try and get through it as quickly
Yeah,
as I can
let's
because
do
it's
it.
a long process. Yeah. So I actually had the idea for the book when I was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it came from a nightmare I had when I was a teenager.
Mm.
And I knew I wanted to write it as a book, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to approach it.
Mm.
I had a short story version of it written at one point, but I realized like for a story like that, there's no way it could be in a short story format.
Mm.
Definitely needed some fleshing out, especially with all the stuff that happens in the book. So while I was at college at NC State, I took a bunch of literature classes like any creative writer who attends college and studies creative writing usually does, or any
Wow.
literature major.
Wow.
So there's a lot of literature classes that inspired me. There was a science fiction one I took. There was Middle English literature for my honor electives. I remember that one. And I remember one that we did. It was a specific course for English honors students where you could learn about North Carolina authors. And I
Mm.
was from North Carolina State
Oh.
University. So it was a very specific course where we had a bunch of authors who wrote Southern literature books come in, talk about their books. Um, and it was very fascinating to learn of all the themes and
Mm.
motifs that come with each genre. And
Yeah.
I was always drawn to science fiction and Southern literature because in Southern literature, there's always very complex but larger than life characters. And in science fiction, there's always a larger than life plot. And I
Mm,
knew for a story like Zero Gravity, it definitely had to be larger than life, especially with the idea being larger than life.
yeah.
So I really wanted to go all out for that one. And another thing that inspired me was actually the people around me at that time.
Mm,
Um, so I had some friends, and usually when I look at my life, like from a regular person perspective, not
mm,
from an author perspective per se, I sometimes have the question in my mind, like, how would this person react if they were in the situation?
yeah,
And
you know.
that's where I got the idea to put all the characters in there and to work with the idea that I had for Zero Gravity.
Oh, wow. That's quite beautiful to know, really. Quite amazing and quite lovely. And now, following on your answer to that question, I'm curious to ask you, are some of the overarching themes, subject lines, and, some of the things we'd expect, say, overarching themes or subject lines, and themes I would pick up reading Zero Graffiti? If at all, you can share a bit of that with us too. That would be great.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things about Zero Gravity is there's the line onward with the future on the cover.
Mm,
And one of the biggest themes of Zero Gravity is how the past, the present, and the future connect. I'm going to try not to spoil so much because
wow.
it's a really big part of the book.
Wow.
But I'm just going to say that they all overlap quite a bit in the book,
Mm,
especially in the world that they're in, like how the world was before this happened, how the
yeah.
world was like during this happened, and how the world will be like after this happens, if there is
Mm,
an after to what
yeah.
happens. Another big theme was fear of the unknown before the book, because it's about a book. It's a time where gravity can be lost at any moment,
Mm,
and you're not sure how long it's going to last, or when it will happen, or if it's going to affect the people you love and care about, and things that
mm,
you'll lose. So that was another big theme, and also the theme of loss comes up quite a bit, especially when you're in an apocalyptic world. So those are definitely some themes and subject lines you could definitely expect in Zero Gravity.
that's amazing, really. That's quite lovely.
Thank
I love
you.
your take. I love your take on that. These are quite beautiful themes and subject lines. And now
Thank you.
I would like you to show that to the camera as well so you can see what it looks like.
Absolutely.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, wow. I love the cover. Look at the
Thank you.
cloudy look over there.
Thank you.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
there's the
looks
line
like you're
onward
looking
with the
into
future at the
heaven.
bottom.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
amazing. That's a lovely
Thank
cover.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome. And also, Elizabeth, as a writer of different kind of fiction and poetry, I'd like to ask you, how do you balance writing across different genres, multiple genres, without feeling like you're splitting your creative energy, if in any way?
I would say that I go with where my heart lies.
Hmm.
And I understand that some authors may feel overwhelmed going from
Yeah,
genre to genre,
yeah,
and every writer has a different experience. For
absolutely.
me personally, I go with where my heart lies,
Hmm.
and I I don't like to put myself specifically in one genre because
Hmm.
I feel like I'm putting myself in a box, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I don't want that to constrict my creative energy. So
Yeah.
I go with where my heart lies. And I've gone to several different genres over the years. Like my very first novel actually was a Western about my great uncle because he asked me to write
Oh,
one about him.
oh,
Right. And I knew nothing about Westerns at that time. So I really had to do a lot of research, but I loved the challenge of
wow.
learning new genres and how they work. And I've done two science fiction novels, including Zero Gravity, and now a poetry collection. And now I'm diving into two other projects where one is a romance novel and the other one is a
Wow.
fantasy science fiction one.
That's a
So
lot.
it is a lot, but I really go with where my heart lies and give it my all. And I'm not afraid of the challenge because writing is definitely not easy. It's not for the faint hearted. But the one thing that motivates me the most would definitely be my readers asking, "Oh, what are you working on next?" And my
Next.
family, "Oh, when is that next book coming?" It's like, it's coming. Like, I'm trying.
Give me some more time. I need to rest a bit. Yeah, it's
Right,
so
exactly.
just take it easy
Mhm,
with me, please.
right.
Oh my, I think every writer feel this way, every author feel this way. Even sometimes when inspiration
Mhm.
comes to me and it tells me, Peter, pick a pen and start writing, I'm like, oh, doing a beat, please, I want to sleep. I'm like, oh no, not today, please. I want to sleep. I want to rest a bit. Oh jeez, I've been reading a lot. So I'm like, the words keep, but one thing about it is, once the words keep coming to my head over and over again, I have no option. I'll just pick up my pen and write, or pick my phone and take a note, stuff like that. But then I can understand, it's a lovely feeling, and it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. And also, even dating back from your response to that, I'm always fascinated by how authors, especially novelists like yourself, would sit down and craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentences makes paragraph and paragraphs makes pages and pages make chapters and chapters make an eventual which novel like you've just shown to the camera. And this always leaves me thinking, how exactly did they got the idea and inspiration to put these words together? This must be very strange. Like, where are these words coming from? It's always very surprising to me and quite commendable and very shocking, really. But then now, as far as writing is concerned, I'd like to ask you, how exactly do you get the inspiration and ideas to craft these words together, to get your works together, and to write your books? Please tell me. I'm curious.
sure. So I've been writing for a long time. I've been writing probably since my childhood. Like I remember picking up
Yeah.
a pencil and writing my very first story on a notebook when I was like 11 years old. And I'm 24 now, so it's been a while.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of ways I've gotten inspiration over the past few years. Like when I was younger, I got my ideas mostly from movies and TV shows.
Mm.
And I remember my dad was a really big fan of WWE. And some days I would just listen in
Oh,
and watch on the conversations that they would have, and I would get ideas like that.
oh,
um,
wow.
right. So that's one thing that a lot of people are shocked about me. But I do remember watching some of those episodes of WWE growing up and being like, wow, I really like the conversations that they're having. This would go really well in the books.
Yeah.
um, right. And of course, like, right. And now that I'm older, I definitely get inspiration from novels I read too, like from my literature classes. I
Mm.
remember being really inspired by Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and I remember being inspired by a bit of the novel As I Lay Dying. Um, so, but now I would mostly say that it's the people around me and the things that happen in my life. I used to be so embarrassed about since I get excited over the littlest of things, but
Mm.
now I just do it unapologetically and unfiltered when it happens. And looking back, one of my author friends and I were talking the other day, and she says life is the fuel for imagination, and that could not be any truer. If I'm really excited about something that's happening in my life, I'm going to write about it. If there's
Wow.
something that's depressing going on in my life, I'm gonna write about it. Like I may not mean to or intend to, but it'll hit the page like one way or the other. So
I love that. That's quite amazing, really. That's a very lovely one. Yeah. It's always very amazing.
mhm.
Even to myself, really. It's always very surprising and quite fun. I authors get inspiration from the ones I've interviewed so far. Like people tell me, yeah, well, Peter, I get inspiration from things I've seen around me. I got inspiration from movies that I watch, just like what you mentioned, WWE and novels and books you've read in the past. And some would say, yeah, I've got inspiration
Mhm.
from my personal life experiences, from the stories of friends, from conversations that I eavesdrop on that doesn't belong to me, from gossip, hilariously, from story of family member or relative or neighbors if you happen to get to know, if possible, or hilariously from even the dream that I have when I go to sleep in the night. It's always very surprising how
Mhm.
these areas of inspirations come to be, and it's just so beautiful. One of the reasons that makes writing
Right.
quite fun, really.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't talked now about inspirations and ideas. I'd like us to diversify a bit into the conversation of readers' feedbacks. Because even I myself as a writer,
Mhm.
I love sometimes to sit back and listen to readers' feedback. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex in its entirety is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. And sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author, sometimes they might not get a message intended by the author, sometimes they might be close to getting the message, and sometimes they might just hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. And as hilariously fun as this sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your books differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
It's definitely fun to see. One of the joys of it is that it can be subjective.
Yeah,
And as authors, we do our best to try and get our point across
yeah.
how we see it as.
Mm,
But some people see it in a different light. For me, it's kind of funny to watch. So I'll never forget like when I saw a review of Zero Gravity online a little bit, like my mom was just
mm,
looking at my book out of curiosity and she was
absolutely,
reading through some of the reviews. And there was one person who had a really good interpretation of how the Gravity Lost episodes were a figurative representation of how chaotic life can be. And I found that to be a really cool inspiration.
Mm,
Um, but as a writer, it's not my job to say this is what I was trying to say.
mm,
It's rather to provide a good story and to send messages in a
yeah,
way that can hook them, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And as writers, we may not always agree with the interpretations of our work from our readers. It does
Mm,
spark conversations and questions. And I feel like if any story can do that, then it's a
yeah.
really good story and it got the point across, in my opinion. So it's always been my goal. And I'll never forget one time where one of my friends was reading Records You Don't Care About. There was a poem in there and
Mm.
supposed to be a sarcastic one. Figured I'd just have fun writing a sarcastic poem. And she was like, that was a really dark and depressing poem. I was like, that wasn't my intent, but okay. so, and
You can imagine that.
I just looked back and I was like, oh, I see it now. Like I see it.
Yeah, it's such a fun one, really. And it's one of the things that I think make a book conversation, book club meetings to be quite fun. There stands whereby we can
Right.
read the same book and we come together, maybe in number of 10 or if 15 people gather together, or even 20, for instance, come together and talk about a book that we've just read and we've gathered to discuss it. And you just sit back and watch the first person review differ slightly from the second person review and differ slightly from the third person review. Sometimes I understand we may find some things in common that we relate to. Like, oh yeah, I saw that too, I read that too, I saw that too. Quite fun and beautiful. And from the fifth person review, oh no, 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 we keep having different readers bringing in their ideas and take. And sometimes just got you wondering that, do we read the same book? I'm not understanding. I mean, did you see that? I didn't see that. It's always very different from person to person. And I think again, another thing that people tends to interpret books with is how they relate with the story, how it speaks to themselves, how they were able to involve and evoke all of the emotion and the story time, and how much of themselves they can see in your characters, in your storytelling, in your plot twists, etc. So it differs from person to person. And right,
Right. Mhm.
absolutely fun, right? Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And now, just apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Yeah, so I have quite a bit. Like I said, I started when I was 18 years old.
Mm.
So my first one, I actually have a cover of the book if that's okay to share.
Yeah, that's
Um,
okay.
so this is the first one I wrote about my great uncle.
Wow.
Um, it's called The Life of David Earl Penning. He was really big on westerns,
Mm.
and this was the first ever book that I ever wrote. And I'll never forget, I was having a conversation with him.
Mm.
Huge fan of westerns,
Yeah.
and I was working on a science fiction project at that time,
Wow.
and he said, "Well, why don't you take a break from that and write a western?" I was like, "Did you just give me a challenge?" I was like, "Challenge accepted." It's like I'm gonna do it. So I
Wow.
remember writing that, and I wasn't really thinking if I was ever gonna get it published or not. I just tried, and then Outlaws Publishing was the first one I tried, and
Mm.
it was the first one I ever tried, and they said yes within like a day of me sending the manuscript, and that's how I got that one published. Um,
Wow.
then after that, I wrote Never After. It's a story about a guy who gets turned into a bionic being. Like, he has robotic arms,
Mm,
and he has like upgrades to his eyes where he could see things, like almost like camera eyes, like in science fiction movies where you'll see they have like robotic eyes and they can zoom in, see,
mm,
identify who the person is and stuff like that.
yeah.
And those were the two ones that I had first. And the two other ones I'm working on right now, one of them is a romance novel.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm on the first draft of that one. I can't really give too much away, but I'm really excited about it. And I do have some of my beta readers already looking into it. And
Wow.
it's a blast seeing reactions,
Mm,
and recommending stuff to put in the book. So that's always a fun thing. And I've been working on Indescribable Ink. It's a story that I've been working on for a few years now.
mm.
Um, it's about a guy who has tattoos that can move across his body and come out of his hands as real life objects.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm excited about that one. It's just taking a lot longer because the idea means so much to me, coming from
Mm.
um, when I was a teenager and when I first started off writing. So I really wanted to make sure that it's definitely living up to that big idea that I had when I was younger. So yeah.
Wow, that's quite lovely, quite beautiful, and quite amazing, really. I love your take on that. I really love your take on that. Yeah, I also wanted
Thank
to
you.
ask you, yeah, as a published author, what sort of advice would you give other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category?
Of course. So I would say not to be harsh on yourself.
Mm,
Writing
good question,
is
so.
not an easy process.
It's not.
It's more, yeah, it's more than just brainstorming ideas. And it's painting a picture with the best words you can use. It's framing it in a way where readers can be immersed in the world you're
Mm,
creating.
yeah.
And it's teaching a good message while also entertaining the reader or teaching them something that they can take into the real life world with them.
Mm,
And that is not something that can be done overnight. That's not something that's like a one time thing. It's a process. Like,
yes.
I've been working on this one book
Yeah.
for years now,
Mm,
and it's driving me nuts. Like, I want to get it out there, but just want to get it out there in the best way that I can.
mm,
And publishing, whether if it be traditional or self publishing, is not an easy journey either. Like, I've known
mm,
several authors get
yeah.
rejected multiple times.
Mm,
And I finally had a friend of mine who just got published, and she's been trying for like 3 years now, and she finally got published,
mm,
and she's really excited about that. And we were talking the other day, and she said, "I didn't realize publishing was going to be that hard. Like, I thought writing was going to be hard, but not the act of
yeah.
publishing itself." And while it is hard, I would say, like, don't let it deter you, because
Yeah,
that book is going to be out one way or the other, and it may not
absolutely.
be right, and it may not be with the publisher that you wanted it to be with, or it may not be the way that you wanted the book to get out there, like through traditional publishing
Mm,
or self-publishing.
yeah,
There still will be a way for that book to get out there. Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I love your take on that, really. I really love your take.
Thank you.
Amazing, really. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. And also, I wanted to ask you, just for the sake of viewers who are watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of any of your books. On what platform are they available on for purchase?
On Amazon, that's where all my books are available for now. I'm hoping I can extend to other bookstores at some point,
Mm,
but since I am um, self-publishing right now, I mostly rely on Amazon. I know Zero Gravity is available on Barnes and Noble at the
yeah.
moment, so I was really excited about that.
Mm.
And yeah, it's available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon for Zero Gravity, but Records You Don't Care About is strictly on Amazon.
Interesting. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Elizabeth Pridgen books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles, on our website, and also on other platforms. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say this is more than awesome. Very great. Quite exciting, so much fun, and lovely having a conversation around your beautiful titles. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, really.